was assigned to guard the east wing of a centuries-old royal estate. My post sat beneath a grand oil painting, an ancestor of the family, a duke from the 1600s. Private security teaches you one thing above all: silence is never empty. In hotels, it means someone's where they shouldn't be. In nightclubs, it means the crowd's about to turn ugly. And in royal palaces, silence has its own weight. The east wing of the estate was mine. It wasn't the glamorous part that tourists see on postcards. No throne room, no gilded ballrooms, no velvet carpets rolled out for visiting presidents. My wing was older, narrower. The stone walls still breathed damp air, as though the place hadn't quite left the 1600s behind. And right in the middle of my patrol sat the painting, a grand oil portrait, taller than a man, framed in heavy gold. The subject was a duke, long dead but eternally stern, with pale eyes that glared out from under his powdered wig. The first night, I laughed it off. I'd worked night shifts too long, not to know how the brain plays tricks. But every night, when the candles flickered just so, I could feel it. His eyes, tracking me. By week 3, I stopped laughing. It was a Tuesday, and my shift was dragging. Midnight had come and gone. The estate was silent except for the wind pressing against the windows. I walked the corridor, boots echoing against marble, and glanced at the portrait out of habit. That's when I froze. The Duke's hand, the painted one gripping his sword, had shifted. No longer resting on the hilt, but raised, pointing across the hall. I stepped closer, the air tightening in my lungs. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it had always been like that. But I'd seen this painting every night for weeks. I knew every detail of that smug, aristocratic face. And I knew, without a doubt, the hand had moved. It pointed toward a door opposite the portrait. Old oak, iron hinges, a lock that hadn't been touched in decades. Storage, they told me on my first day. Don't bother with it. I wanted to ignore it, just keep walking, pretend I hadn't seen. But protocol gnawed at me. Check doors, check locks. So I reached for the handle. Warm, not just warm, pulsing, like gripping a wrist and feeling blood rushing beneath the skin. Then I heard it. From behind the door, slow, deliberate breathing. Not hurried, not frightened. Patient, controlled. As if whoever, or whatever, was in there knew I was listening. I yanked my hand back and stumbled a step away. My radio hissed at my belt, silent otherwise. The corridor was too still, too long. My pulse hammered in my ears. I backed away until the painting was behind me, until I was out of that hall entirely. I didn't return to the east wing for the rest of the shift. I made up excuses in the logbook. Faulty lights, unstable windows, anything but the truth. Morning came, sunlight spilling through the stained glass, and I forced myself back down the hall. The door was cold again. The silence was ordinary. And when I turned toward the painting, my stomach dropped. The Duke's hand was back on his sword, perfectly painted, perfectly composed, as if it had never moved at all. But now the eyes were different. They weren't just following me, they were watching me. For weeks, I tried to convince myself it hadn't happened. Sleep deprivation, shadows, too much coffee. I told myself anything to make it stop replaying in my head. But one night, another guard drew the east wing post. He came back pale, shaking, swearing he'd heard voices whispering his name from behind that same door. He wouldn't finish his shift. Transferred out the next day. No one lasts long in the east wing. They rotate us, shuffle the duty, keep it quiet. But the painting never leaves. It looms, patient as ever, in its heavy golden frame. And sometimes, if you pass it at the right angle, the Duke's painted hand twitches, almost too quick to catch. Almost. People think guarding royalty is glamorous. Red carpets, parades, champagne receptions with crystal glasses. What they don't see are the nights in stone corridors, alone with things that don't make sense. I've faced stalkers, assassins, mobs. Flesh and blood threats, I can fight, control, stop. But the painting, the breathing door, those I can't protect anyone from, not even myself, because I know one day soon I'll walk that corridor again. And when I do, the Duke won't just point, he'll beckon. They say royalty carries a crown of shadows, but sometimes it isn't the politics. Sometimes it's the thing that was buried with their ancestors and never stayed buried. If that makes your blood run cold, hit like, drop a comment, and share before the chapel bells toll. And if you're still here right now, subscribe, but don't look toward the palace windows, because once you hear what royal guards whisper about in the dark, you'll realize not every secret of the crown is human. And now you know. Every royal residence has its stories. Some are printed neatly in history books. Coronations, treaties, scandals. Others are whispered only in the guardhouse after the lights go out, when the corridors are too quiet to trust. The story of the tower belonged to the latter. It stood at the far edge of the royal estate, a crooked silhouette against the sky. An old watchtower from the 1500s, back when the crown feared sieges and rebellions. For the last 100 years, it had been sealed. No access, no repairs, no patrols assigned. The official word was unstable structure. The unofficial word was cursed. Veteran guards warned us, never patrol near it after midnight. Some swore they'd heard the bell toll when no bell was there. Others said they'd seen a light flickering inside, as though someone carried a lantern up the spiral stairs. I didn't believe in any of it. Not then. One stormy night, I drew the short straw. We ran shifts by lot, and mine landed squarely on the east perimeter, the side closest to the tower. Rain lashed the walls, wind whistled through arrow slits, and my boots slipped on the stones slick with moss. I told myself it was just another night, just another post. At 2:13 a.m., I heard it. A single, heavy toll that rolled through the rain like thunder. I stopped dead, my heart lurching. The bell hadn't rung in over a century. I knew that for a fact. Its clapper had been removed, its rope discarded, the great iron shell left to rust, and yet the sound was unmistakable. The radios on our belts erupted with static. Panicked voices overlapped. Other guards had heard it too. One cursed under his breath. Another asked if lightning had struck the tower. Then came the second sound. Not from above, from inside. Footsteps. Slow at first, then faster. Climbing the spiral staircase within the tower. The scrape of boots, or bare feet, echoing up the stone. And beneath it, faint but steady, the clatter of chains being dragged. I should have called it in. Should have left. But my training held me in place. Rain soaked through my jacket as I stood at the locked entrance, flashlight trembling in my hand. The footsteps grew louder, closer, circling upward, until they seemed just above my head. Then silence. Only the storm remained, wind howling across the courtyard. By morning, a team of us was sent to check. The door was forced open, hinges groaning in protest. We climbed the staircase together, boots stirring centuries of dust. No intruder, no lantern, no chains. But halfway up, the trail appeared. Footprints, bare, human, wet as though the owners had stepped in a pool of water. They climbed halfway, then stopped abruptly on a landing. No smudge, no turnaround, no descent. Just gone. We left the tower sealed again, none of us eager to linger. The report was filed under unexplained disturbance, the kind of paperwork that never leaves the archives. But that wasn't the end. Every year, on that same night, at 2:13 a.m., the bell tolls once more. The storm doesn't matter. The weather doesn't matter. The sound rolls out across the estate, deep and heavy, rattling the windows. The newer guards always jump. Radio's alive with nervous chatter. The veterans, we stay quiet. We already know what follows. The footsteps, the dragging chains, the climb that never ends. And if you stand too close to the tower when it happens, if you press your ear to the stone in defiance of every warning, you'll hear something else. Not just footsteps, not just chains. A voice, whispering in a language no one recognizes, growing louder with each passing year. Some say it's the ghost of a royal prisoner, locked away and forgotten. Some say it's the executioner, bound to his duty for eternity. And others say it's older still, that the tower was built not to keep enemies out, but to keep something in. Whatever it is, one thing is certain. The tower bell does not ring for us. It rings because something inside still climbs those stairs, and it's only a matter of time before it reaches the top. Royal protocol teaches you to disappear. When you're standing 2 feet behind a monarch's chair, you are not a person, you are a post. You do not flinch, you do not cough, you do not speak. You are a ghost in uniform. I had been trained for years in discipline and silence. And yet on that night, during a private dinner deep inside the oldest wing of the palace, I almost broke. The hall was magnificent in the way only centuries of wealth can be. Chandeliers dripping with crystal, walls lined with oil paintings, their eyes heavy with judgment, gold trim catching the candlelight. Everything shimmered, too bright to be trusted. Her Majesty dined alone at the long oak table. The cutlery gleamed. A crystal wine glass caught the light like fire. I stood behind her chair, my hands clasped, my breathing measured. And then I saw it. On the wall behind her, her shadow did not match. At first, it was subtle. When she lifted her wine glass, the shadow's hand lagged a second too long before following. My eyes narrowed, but I said nothing. Fatigue, I told myself. Tricks of the light. But then it grew worse. When she lowered her fork, the shadow kept eating. A grotesque pantomime, raising invisible food to invisible lips. I stared, pulse quickening, fighting the urge to step back. The queen's movements remained graceful, precise, but her shadow, it seemed ravenous. I blinked hard, but the image held, and then the shadow turned its head, not toward the queen, toward me. The hall froze around me, though the candles still burned. Its face, her face, stretched and blackened, twisted into a grin. The mouth opened wide, wider than natural, as though it wanted to speak. My throat went dry. I clenched my jaw, fighting every instinct to cry out. Protocol. I said nothing. I did nothing. At that precise moment, Her Majesty set down her glass. Slowly, deliberately, she rose from her chair. The movement was elegant, effortless, as if the dinner had ended exactly when she intended. But I saw the flicker in her eyes as she turned. She knew. She knew what I'd seen. The dinner was never mentioned again. In the logbook, the evening was recorded as uneventful. I was not reprimanded, not rotated to a different post. It was as though the incident had never happened. But something had shifted. In the days that followed, I began to notice things. The queen avoided certain windows at dusk. Her curtains were always drawn at night, no matter the weather. And her chambermaids whispered about strange stains on the walls, dark smudges that no amount of scrubbing could remove. One evening, while standing guard near the royal chapel, I caught sight of her reflection in a tall mirror. Except it wasn't her. Not exactly. Her body moved, turning delicately toward the altar. But in the glass, her reflection lagged again. Not by seconds, but by breaths. As if two selves moved out of rhythm, one tethered to the other. The other guards never spoke of it openly, but I could see the fear in their eyes. They stood straighter when she passed, as though hoping posture alone could protect them from whatever lingered just behind her. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of my mind. Shadows shift, mirrors lie, fatigue distorts perception. But then, one night during a storm, lightning split the sky over the estate. The dining hall flashed white for an instant, and I saw it again, her shadow towering against the wall. But this time, the queen was seated, still, silent. Her shadow was standing, and in that split second of light, it took a step toward me. I never questioned her directly. That would have been unthinkable. But I'll never forget the look she gave me the night after the dinner. As she rose from her chair, her eyes caught mine. Not furious, not confused, almost relieved. As if she wanted me to know. As if she wanted someone else to carry the burden of seeing what followed her. Royal guards are trained to protect flesh and blood. To stop threats you can hold, handcuff, disarm. But how do you protect someone from their own shadow? And worse, how do you protect yourself when that shadow knows you're watching? Because every time I close my eyes, I see it. Not the queen, not the dining hall. Just that twisted mouth, opening wider, wider, as if it's still waiting to speak. And deep down, I pray it never does. Every royal estate has secrets. You expect that when you sign on, vaults of jewels, sealed rooms filled with priceless heirlooms, archives so old the paper crumbles at the touch. But nothing prepared me. For the night I was ordered to guard the chapel. It was during restoration work. The royal masons had been reinforcing the foundations, patching cracks that time had carved into the stones. That chapel was older than most countries. Romanesque arches, windows blackened with centuries of smoke. Inside, the air always smelled of incense and damp earth, as though the building itself were still alive. Around midnight, the foreman came running. His crew had broken through a wall beneath the altar. Behind it, they'd found a hidden passage, sealed for centuries, untouched by any record or archive. The masons refused to go further. They packed up their tools, pale-faced and trembling, and left. My orders were simple. Stand guard until historians arrived in the morning. Keep the curious away. Make sure no one entered. Easy enough, I thought. But by 3 a.m., I realized the order had been given for another reason. My flashlight beam cut through the dust as I descended the rough stone steps. The air grew colder with each step, heavy, as though the darkness itself pressed against my chest. The walls were carved, not with crosses or saints, but with symbols I didn't recognize. Sharp spirals, interlocking circles, figures bent in strange, unnatural postures. They weren't Christian. They weren't even medieval. They were older. I crouched closer, brushing the carvings with my glove. The stone seemed warmer than it should have been, as though the symbols themselves still remembered the hands that had carved them. That's when I heard it. Voices. At first, faint, then growing louder, echoing through the passage like water rising in a flood. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all chanting in unison. A language I couldn't place. Guttural, rhythmic, ancient. I froze, straining to locate the source. The sound didn't come from the stairs above or the chamber ahead. It came from below, from the stone itself, from the cracks in the floor. My light swept across the passage. Nothing but dust and rock. Empty. Yet the sound rose and rose, a chorus of voices pressing against my skull until I felt my knees weaken. And then I saw it. The floor was wet. Not puddles from groundwater, not condensation dripping from the ceiling, but liquid seeping upward, forcing itself through cracks that hadn't seen daylight in 4 centuries. Thick, dark, metallic, blood, fresh, still warm. It pooled across the stones, winding toward the altar steps, like it remembered the way. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and nearly dropped my torch. I wanted to run, but protocol chained my feet. Guards don't flee. Guards don't panic. But that night, every instinct screamed at me to get out. I forced myself up the steps, never turning my back to the dark. The chanting grew louder as I climbed, though my boots slipped on the wet stone. At the top, I slammed the chapel door shut, my breath ragged, and just like that, silence. The voices stopped. The air was still. Only the faint smell of iron lingered, drifting up through the cracks like a warning. At dawn, the historians arrived, but they didn't examine the passage. They didn't even look curious. Instead, a team of workers moved in with bricks and mortar. By noon, the stairwell was gone, sealed behind fresh stone, as if it had never existed. No reports filed, no photographs taken, nothing for the record books. The official story was simple. The masons found a structural weakness, and it was repaired. That was all. But I know what I heard, what I smelled, what seeped up from those cracks in the earth. The chapel has been restored since then. The walls repainted, the altar polished, the pews replaced with shining oak. Tourists visit daily, lighting candles and whispering prayers. But if you stand in the nave long enough, when the air grows heavy and the silence presses down, you notice something. The faint smell of iron. And if you dare to kneel at the altar, you can still see a dark stain spreading through the cracks in the floor. The stone remembers, and somewhere beneath, so do the voices.